Welcome to the Gathering of Tribes weekly discussion of the Come Follow Me lessons. I'm Chuck Kay, and I'm here with Rachel Krause, and we're happy to have you join us as we discuss the Doctrine and Covenants with faithful members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This week, we've invited Sister Vianna Boyce to join the conversation.
Diana Boyce was born and raised in Tahiti by two loving parents who showed her what it truly means to follow Christ no matter what. Their love for the Savior and her grandmother's life example became the foundation of her own spiritual journey. She is the oldest of three and cherishes her younger siblings deeply. After leaving Tahiti to study political science at BYU, Hawaii, Diana served a full-time mission on Temple Square and in the Chicago mission. She met her husband Eric in her last year at BYU Hawaii. This was a beautiful surprise and blessing from heaven. Together, they are raising three teenage boys in California, homeschooling them and supporting them in all their pursuits. For fun, Vianna loves drawing portraits, painting with watercolor, reading, learning, and keeping a picture journal of her family life. She signs up for classes whenever time permits and recently connected to healing modalities. These learning courses have beautifully tied together her healing journey and gospel principles. She has also started and have yet to finish a podcast about receiving Christ, sharing about others' journeys with Jesus and how they came to him. Vianna was blessed to participate in season 5 of the Book of Mormon and seasons 5 and 6 of The Chosen. It was sacred for her to stand alongside people of many beliefs, all united by our shared love for Jesus. She hopes to continue to help those crossing her path to experience the joy that comes from doing life here on earth with God. Thank you so much, Diana. This is an amazing bio. You have some really great things going on, and we'd love to have you share a little bit more about yourself.
Yes, I am an Islander. Not your typical one. Instead of the one on stage shaking and doing all the fun dances, I was more the nerdy kind, always in books. And that love of learning just never left me. And so I'm continuously learning in every sphere, really, like gospel related, the people related, everything. There's just in my mind, I know we're given an appointed time, but in my mind, there's not enough time for all the learning. So I'm just kind of like, whenever an opportunity comes, I just jump on it. I just want to learn more and more. So yeah.
That's awesome.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I love to hear that.
Well, we'll go ahead and jump into the lesson now. This is uh, lesson called "Oh God, Where Art Thou?" And this is from Doctrine and Covenants sections 121 through 123. And I've asked Rachel to if she would read the first paragraph of the lesson right from the manual. So if you would do that, Rachel.
Yeah. So the bottom level of the jail in Liberty, Missouri, was known as the dungeon. The walls were thick, the stone floor was cold and filthy, food was scarce and rotten, and the two narrow iron-barred windows near the ceiling allowed for very little light. This is where Joseph Smith and a few others spent 4 frigid months during the winter of 1838 and 39. During this time, Joseph was constantly receiving news about the suffering of the saints. The peace and optimism felt in Far West had lasted only a few months, and now the saints were without a home, once again, driven into the wilderness in search of yet another place to start over, this time with their prophet in prison.
You know, you think about this, and I don't know if you've ever visited any of those church historical sites. I've not been able to visit Liberty, but I've gone to some of the other sites, and you know, you think when it says you're in jail, you think of, I guess, jails now because back then they were had to be pretty miserable. I mean, I think there were six brethren all cooped up in this one spot, and this jail was pretty formidable. They had some very unique ideas about how to build this jail. They once tried to dig their way out of there, and there's actually two stone walls separated with a center that had smaller rocks and dirt. So if you tried to dig through the wall, all you would encounter was this new section of rock. And as you started to pull it out, it would just keep collapsing down and down on you. So there's no end to it. It just kept falling in on you, so you could never get to the outside. So it was, I think, just all those things that put you in this mindset of how miserable they were, bad food, not being able to see your family, and all these things had to put them in such a miserable state of mind. Um, and then you read the second paragraph from this introduction. It says, and yet, even in that miserable jail, knowledge from heaven came pouring down. Joseph's questions, "Oh God, where art thou?" was answered clearly and powerfully. Fear not, for God shall be with you forever and ever. And so I think about that. I mean, we've all been in miserable situations that we thought were horrible, and thinking and hoping that we would get out of them, to the point, I don't know that I've ever prayed, that fervently, please save me from this. But how would you feel if you received that answer? So, Vayana, what do you think about that?
Um, I kind of not to the same level as Joseph Smith, but I kind of went through that in 2020. I guess that was my refining fire, where I really had to seek out the Lord in a very difficult situation, not really knowing what was the right thing to do, because I was in that situation where I was the only one, and I was given a choice to do the one thing that was counter to everybody else. And so it's really not easy when you receive that personal revelation that you are given a specific mission and it is completely different from everyone around. It's not the norm. And when you don't want to stand out, it makes it even more difficult to follow that answer. And you're like, all right, well, and so for me, even after getting an answer like that, it was really important to get a confirmation. Like, did I really hear the Lord say that? It wasn't just my own mind trying to like play tricks on me or whatever, right? And then he confirmed it through a song. And that's when I knew it was his voice speaking to me and not my own mind, because there's no coincidence. I've learned a long time now that there is no such thing as coincidence in life. It's all a matter of seeing what's in front of you for what it really is. And so when I got that answer that the Lord will uphold me in that task that he's asking me to do, even though he knows it's going to be difficult, that I just needed to trust him, that he doesn't call people without preparing for it. And so with that answer, I just kind of pushed forward. Sometime I kind of slipped back to, forgetting that moment, that very sacred moment when he actually spoke to my soul. And then I will try to grab a hold to that memory, and then get back up on my feet and then move forward with what he asked me to do. So that's kind of my little connection with Joseph Smith here. Like in that moment, I understood what it was like for him, to be in that moment. It's not easy. But if the Lord is the one who calls you, he's the one that gave you life, and I don't know, for me, it's like I owe him everything. So even if it's hard, I'm going to push through because I owe him that much. So.
I like that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. This week's lesson seemed to be exactly what I needed to hear this week. It seems like in our family, there's just been, at least for my husband and I, there have been a lot of trials. There have been a lot of things, and you think, okay, this has got to be the big thing. And, once we get done with this, it's, things are going to get easier. And then something else comes up, or you thought something was taken care of and now you find out that it was not. And it just feels like there've been just wave after wave, coming at us. And I, it's been really hard. And I definitely identify with that question, oh God, where art thou? Because even though I know that he's with me, there are times where I'm like, but I don't feel you. I don't see you. Are you? I know you're there, but are you there? Um, it's kind of, it's difficult at times, and you just, when you feel those waves just coming at you and they're crashing, and it feels like you're just keep getting knocked over and over and over again. It's hard to feel that. And so I think I can in some way relate to Joseph Smith about in that feeling, like, when are things going to get easier? When is it going to let up? Will there be a time that it gets easier? Um, but I also feel like every time things get really hard, it's also a really, I know that I'm going to have opportunities to feel closer to my Savior. That I know that, um, in the midst of my hardest trials is when I also have the most connection to Him, because He's there with me. He has to help me through them because I don't know how to get through them.
Yeah.
There's actually, do
Go
you mind
ahead.
if there's so many thought you just brought up. um, we kind of call it like an inside joke. When we were in Hawaii, there's this beach called Pounders. And it's ever since I was talking with some other friends about the same thing, just one thing after another. And I was like, oh, that's like Pounders Beach. Because it's like you'll go buddy surf and it's just the same thing as that one wave after another. And you just when you think you're finally up to the surface and boom, you get hit and hit. And I was like, it's just like it. Um, but it's also reminding me of the Isaiah verse of when it was describing Christ, how he was a man acquainted with grief and sorrow. And so ever since studying that passage, it helped me. And I'm not like perfect in all the time in that thing, but in those clear moments when I remember that verse, it reminds me that when I'm in that pounder effect, that Pounders Beach effect, that I'm actually really getting acquainted myself with Christ, because that was one of the description of who he was, that he was very well acquainted with grief and sorrow. And in that grief and sorrow that I'm going through or somebody else is going through, we're getting closer to him and in a sacred way. And it's almost like it's our sacred offering that we're giving him, and he's turning that offering into something more than we can even imagine. So yeah.
Yeah. When you read the section titled here, with God, adversity can be for my good, those things seem kind of opposite of each other. And I have this saying that when I run into these sort of things, is a standard for me, and it is the ultimate benefit of struggle is strength. And so, yeah, through all these things, we become stronger. And actually, it seems weird, but we can become more faithful. We can believe better. I think about the early saints, especially those crossing the plains, and you hear about the uh, Martin Willie Handcart Company, and them pushing their way across during the dry season, and how exhausted they were. I mean, they're pulling hand carts, they're not riding horses or in wagons. And so how exhausted they were, and the experiences of, I could only go up to this next hill and then I had to quit. And them expressing, and I got there and I felt the cart pushing me, that there were others there with him in his struggle and pushed him along. And so there's a statement here, one of the little ancillary things that are part of the lesson. This is Quentin L. Cook, and he said, Joseph's time in Liberty Jail demonstrates that adversity is not evidence of the Lord's disfavor nor a withdrawal of his blessings. When you think of all the things that he received, the revelations he received while he was there, and the strength that he received, it's not that I don't like you, but I need to prepare you for something that's hard, and you need to understand. I was talking to a member of my state presidency today, and he was talking about we were talking about adversity for some reason, and how it seems like we always have to be humbled before we actually gain the insight and strength, and I guess the power to do the next thing that's good. And what a blessing that we have, and this assurance we need to remember that this is not a punishment or disfavor, but the Lord still provides his blessings to us. So I think that was pretty amazing. And I'm glad that Joseph wrote about this. You know, it's something I think that's helped all of us over the years. And so this next section, true power and influence are based on the principles of righteousness. Now I have to start this by saying something. In the Doctrine and Covenant, it talks about that the priesthood can only be operated upon the principles of righteousness. And ever since I was a young man studying in the mission field, you know, I'm one of those guys that looked for the list, you know, of things when there's they have things mentioned like that. It's they talk about these principles of righteousness. So I went and, you know, searched for that, and I never could find anywhere where anybody said these are the principles of righteousness. And then I read this over several times, and in this section, it talks about those particular things in that are part of the principles, righteousness and humility and just all these little things. Like, oh, I was looking, for a list that some prophet had written, that was labeled the principles of righteousness. But then it's all these things that are acquainted with righteousness. And so true power and influence are based on those things. So I found that interesting because when you think about Native Americans, especially, this principle of sacrifice is one of those things. And it seems like any time that they were seeking power or spiritual strength or something to uh, move their group along to help them survive, it was always accompanied by some ceremonial act, which usually uh, required sacrifice. I mean, I served my mission up in the northern central states in Montana, Wyoming, a lot of tribes up there. They do things like Sundance and other things, which are symbolically sacrificial. I mean, they put these eagle claws and stuff through their body, and it's painfully strenuous for them. And I think about those sacrifices and how that preceded them being able to um, sort of straighten up the ship, to get themselves back in alignment and to focus on those things that are there, help them to gain control and inner strength. And although I don't think we're required to do those kinds of things, what sort of things do you think that we are faced with that require our sacrifice here?
Well, the first thought that came to my mind as you were explaining this beautiful ritual, I know that example was used a lot in so many talks, especially the youth, because that's the one that they relate to the most. That principle of like when you want to gain strength, physical strength, and it requires work, right? But then in that process, you actually are sacrificing, like you're breaking down your muscles, right? Like you're breaking down something in order to rebuild it better and stronger. And so like I look at that process and I see that as the same pattern as sacrifice process. It's really breaking down of something to rebuild it better on a stronger foundation. And so it could be, like maybe I'm holding a false belief that is not helping me to get stronger spiritually. And so by sacrificing that false thing, like be willing to like give that up, then I'm able to make more room for the Lord to bring in the 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 true principle, and then I can build stronger with that foundation that He's giving me. And so I really now I can say that because the Lord has taught me that principle. Now I can see that sacrifice is really beautiful. It's not, I mean, yes, it's going to be painful, to be honest, but I see the beauty in a sacrifice much more than how I used to see it. Like before I studied Isaiah and the Book of Mormon and everything else, I used to like look at sacrifice like something that I wanted to stay away from. I wanted nothing to do with it. I'm like, no, I don't like that. Um, I don't like being uncomfortable. But now I still have a little bit of that first reaction of like, ooh, sacrifice. But then I have to remind myself, like, but it's for a good transformation. And so then I'm trying to put myself more in that space of like being more willing to put that sacrifice forward. And a lot of time I find out that it's not what you think it is. Um, when you ask the Lord to like, sorry, is it a little bit too long trying to concise it, but I think it was like 2 years ago with my kids, we were doing for Christmas. I just felt inspired to do a little something different. And it was in connection with the Israelites when they were about to cross the river. They were building these altars with stones. And I saw in my mind this vision of like each one of us building those altars of stones, and on each stone, write down one thing that we wanted to sacrifice in order to know the Lord more fully. And so everybody in the family had their list. I actually didn't fill up my list. Like I kept thinking and thinking. It's like, why can't I sacrifice to the Lord? And then it didn't take, I think it was like probably 3 months after that challenge that I gave to my whole family that I was just driving down somewhere and a thought came in my mind. And it was just a word, a simple word. And again, I'm going to preface this like that was the sacrifice that the Lord asked me. So it's not something for everybody, okay? That was just for me to teach me something. Um, and so the word came and it was chocolate. And I was like, chocolate? Like, and so I kind of pushed it off and then it came back again, chocolate. And I know when it comes back a certain way, it's the Lord trying to get my attention. I'm like, all right, what about chocolate? And what I felt that he was saying to me was like, you asked me what you want to sacrifice in order to know me. And I'm asking you chocolate, sacrifice chocolate. And I was like, really? Chocolate? Like out of everything, that's what you want me to give up? I was just kind of like, this can't be that simple. Again, how connected we are with scriptures, right? Like that kind of reminded me of the children of Israel. Like, look at the serpent. Like, that's simple. Here I was doing the same thing. Like chocolate. Anyway, so then I was like, all right, fine, I'll give up chocolate. And so I started the process of not touching chocolate. And it was probably like about 3 months of doing that, giving up willingly chocolate, that I realized why he was asking me personally to give that up. I didn't realize that chocolate, I was addicted to it, like in an unhealthy manner. Like I'm not talking about people who love chocolate and they'll eat it. It was crazy borderline addiction. And I had no idea. And I was like, whoa, all right, now I see the
Wow.
point. And I realized too that I made that addiction my God. And I was saying I want to know him, but yet I was turning to chocolate when I felt sad, when I felt depressed or whatever. I was turning to chocolate. I wasn't turning to him. And so in that sacrifice he asked me, I learned a lot. And so that's why I'm saying that sometime when you're going to ask him, expect the unexpected because he knows you more than anybody else, more than yourself too. And then you'll be like, oh, all right. So yeah.
I love that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think yeah, sometimes it's hard when you have that thing and you're asked to sacrifice something that maybe doesn't make sense or that's hard to sacrifice. But I love that you've been able to like you've found something in that and that it really truly blessed you. One of the things that kind of popped in my head when you were talking is what happens during the times when you don't feel like you're getting an answer, or you feel like maybe you're getting answers for certain things, but not the ones that you really want the answers to. Like I just picturing Joseph and some of the other men that were with him in jail, and probably, it's like great to hear. I'm glad to hear about what's happening to everybody else, but how am I getting out of jail?
Yeah.
How are you getting me out of here? And, that answer isn't coming. How do you deal with those kinds of situations?
Um, it's hard. Let's just acknowledge that first. It's difficult, right? But I think the trick is um, to remember to not compare ourselves to other people. To really, because like when we start comparing, like, oh, so and so is having the blessing or having the answer, but I'm not getting anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm guilty of feeling that way too, a lot. And so, but I've learned that these moments when I think I'm not getting the answer, um, they're usually invitations by the Lord to look deeper and to be more still. Because sometimes I might want something so badly that I'm creating noise in my own head and I can't hear him trying to get my attention because I'm too busy trying to get the answer. Does that make sense? Or like
Yeah.
I did too much in the pain that I'm not able to actually see clearly what's in front of me. And so when I think I'm not getting anything, I'm trying my best to remove myself from situation that will cause me to be too busy.
Mm-hmm.
Going to a temple, for example, is a great place to go because there's no distraction. You can actually hear your thought. Um, like just finding places that are helpful to just helping you to sit with yourself. Sometimes that's all we need. A lot of time is like we always looking for the answers outside and we're not really looking inside. Um, because what I'm learning more and more in all the studies is we keep forgetting that our physical body is a temple, like literally a temple. And yet we hear about it in scriptures. Like Christ himself said that we are holy temples, right? And so when we are, especially in this society, always going, it's really important that we find time to just sit with ourselves. Because when we do that and we pause, then we're allowing all the chaos around to just kind of disappear. And sometimes it might not come the first time, second time, third time. Doesn't matter. Don't quit. Like keep going. Because eventually you're gonna hear what you need to hear on the inside. Because at least for me, God speaks to me a lot inside. Sometimes I'll get an answer through somebody else talking to me, or I'll be driving down the street and a word will catch my attention, right? But a lot of time he talks to me on the inside when I'm able to hear him. And I just need to kind of declutter my inside with all these thoughts. And also the other thing is a lot of us are going to go through that cycle of feeling like we're not getting answers, we're doing all the right thing, right? But we have to really give grace to ourselves and also remember that the God we believe in is someone who keeps his promises. He's not a liar. He will come at the right time. Um, and you just have to kind of think of like a parent and who has so many children, except that he's like, you know, degrees above, in the ability that he has. But like you have so many children and you're trying to tend to each of them, right? And each child has a different need. And sometimes you are kind of waiting on the sibling to step in so that the other sibling can most likely be receptive, because sometimes the person is not going to receive directly from you, the parent, but they'll be more receptive through a sibling. So sometimes it takes logistics and timing for things to align. And so I think sometimes we're not being patient enough with ourselves and with God. But like don't take it as like, oh gosh, no, it's like we all do it. I do it. Yeah. Yeah, I just have to try to remember myself, like, that's all right. Like the answer will come because
Mm-hmm.
I know the God I know, he's not a liar and he keeps his promises. And so that's kind of how I go about with that. That I used to be terrible at it. So trust me, I get the feeling. But it comes over time. It just takes practice just like lifting weight, it takes practice. You can't expect a giant muscle like this, Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's good. So, one of the things that Joseph received while he was in this prison, he was making his concerns known to his heavenly Father. The Savior reminded him that he had descended below all those things, all of his complaints, everything you're talking about, separated from your family, bad food, everything. He says, I've descended below them all. Art thou greater than me? So he reminded them that I know what you're going through. Don't think that I don't understand your situation. And I think that sometimes I wonder what sort of things the other people in Nauvoo were thinking about him and those that were imprisoned. I know that they had visitors and I know people, family members, but it's like whenever we are in those situations, you hear so many stories of somebody being in a bad state and they're depressed or sick or lonely, and somebody that knows them receives some kind of um, spark, some sort of thought that, hey, maybe I should stop by, bring them some soup, bring them some bread. Maybe I should just stop by and watch a movie with them. And I think sometimes maybe the Lord is waiting for the person to get the message. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes we don't connect spiritually like that, or we're too busy. I've got other things to do. I'm too tired. There's a really good show on right now. I can't go now. All these things that pull us back. And I think this is what sometimes the Lord tests not only the person that is in the in his plan to move his plan forward, but it should be something. I mean, this is why they weren't able to stay in far west, and because they were not a Zion people. They could not build Zion there. They weren't ready to do that. And so they got kicked out. The Lord didn't still designated that place as Zion, and it's still there waiting for us to become a Zion people so we can build it. But we have to be able to do that. We have to have the capacity to do that. And I think that uh, there's probably other factors, but I think that's what the gathering is for. This is why we're gathering people, because those people are out there, the people who can pull this together and make this all happen. We just got to find them. And it's just like the early church, they stumble upon somebody who found a page of the Book of Mormon or something and read it and basically put all their effort into finding out some more. What is this? I need to know more. And it's put that desire in their heart. And so these are the people. These are the people that will build Zion. And I think um, sometimes we need to be aware and open to the promptings of the Spirit, and we need to be willing to act upon those things. And we were talking about sacrifice, and a lot of times we consider that a sacrifice. And we were actually just talking about that this morning in our Sunday school. And I said, the interesting thing about when the Lord required sacrifice in the Old Testament, it wasn't just giving something for an offering, it was the best. It wasn't just, okay, I'll, grab a lamb and I'm going to sack. It was your firstling of your flock, the best one. And so this sometimes to me is kind of what holds us back. This is my best time. This is my favorite show. This is my
Favorite
only last
chocolate.
take of gas. Yeah, this is this is the best chocolate. And but
The
that's
Hawaiian kind.
yeah, yeah, there you go. But that's what he's asking us to sacrifice, the best that we have. If we can offer him the very best that we have and offer that freely, and give that to him. That's where this power is. That's where this spirituality comes from. And I look back to again, Native people. We're from the Hopi tribe, Rachel and I. Me a little bit more than her, but
So many questions for you guys. Oh,
so there's always those things that they do. They sacrifice. They constantly remember their creator in all that they do. I mean, you go down to a field early in the morning and you see the men come down to their field and they're singing to their plants. They're talking to them. They're telling them they're beautiful. You look so healthy. You look so good. They're complimenting them. And I think about all that stuff, you know. It's not for them, it's not just, work, and it's not just a supply of food. It's a blessing from the Creator, and they are stewards of those things. And it's just like children to them. They were given these children to raise, and so they treat them that way. And I think that to me, this is a part of the things that we study that sometimes we don't understand from these scriptures. You read about these things, just like I was talking about these principles of righteousness, and we understand that. But you can apply these to all parts of your life. Talks about gentleness and pure knowledge and doing things without hypocrisy and without guile. If we can incorporate that into ourselves, um,
beautiful truth, and it's all connected.
yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. And sometimes I think we think that our efforts have to be these big, giant things, and they don't. They really don't. Sometimes it's just the smallest thing. And the what comes to my mind is that, when I went to church today, I was feeling a little down. It was kind of just a hard day or whatever. And the sister who got up to give the opening prayer, she's a sister that I just dearly love. And for some reason, she looked right at me right before the prayer and she gave me a little smile. And that was exactly what I needed in that moment. It was just a little thing. She probably had no idea that I needed that. Um, but it was just perfect. It was exactly what I needed. That little second of connection and her seeing me was exactly what I needed in that moment. And I think that it can be that simple, that we can help people in such simple ways. It doesn't have to be giant or flowery. And sometimes, we stop ourselves from, maybe visiting somebody because we don't have a reason to visit them. Why would I call? Why, we feel like we always have to have a reason to do something. And sometimes the reason can be, hey, I was just thinking about you today. How are you? And it can just be small. And
That's
I
an
think that has a
awesome
lot.
reason. I love that. I was
That's
just
what I
thinking
do
about you.
now. If you
Yeah.
think of that person or I mean, their picture comes to your mind, that means like you need to do some reach out, and most often it's like once you actually do, you find out
There
100%
was a reason. Yeah.
there was a reason. So
You,
basically,
you know, you
go
you
for it.
mentioned you mentioned before too that we need to practice this. We need to follow through. I every time, I've taught a lot of youth classes and I would tell them, I said, when we talk about spiritual promptings and stuff, and I said, I know that every one of you has had a spiritual prompting in your life. And they go, well, I don't know. I said, you know what? On Fast Sunday, you hear somebody bear their testimony and you feel like you should go do it and you figure out all the reasons you shouldn't. I don't have on my good shirt, or my hair looks messy, or I'm scared, or I said, you are being prompted. And I promise you, if you take advantage of every time that you feel like you should get up and bear your testimony, you will learn this. The Spirit will recognize you as someone he can count on. I can give them that thought and they will obey. And so this is how you practice this. This is how you become spiritual. You listen to the Spirit and then you follow through.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So good.
Thanks.
They
Uh,
need that.
let's just jump to the last thing here and then we'll kind of move on from there. So it says, this last section says, let us cheerfully do all things that lie in our power. And it's a interesting, I guess, situation when we have a challenge or something that the Lord has asked us to do, and it doesn't seem like we have a way to accomplish that, or that we have the resources that we need to. I'm looking at the lesson here. It says, as you consider the problems in the world today, think about ways to address them that lie in your power. And so there's so many challenges right now. There's so many things that whether it's in our own family, whether it's on our own self, whether it's in our community, whether it's in our ward, whatever those challenges are, um, I think if we could find a way to cheerfully do things that lie within our power to help those things along or to make them better, um, we can do those things. Because I think too many times we think that I'm going to gather Israel. Well, no, you're not. You're gonna gather one person, or you're going to strengthen somebody in your family, or maybe you're just gathering yourself. Maybe you've kind of fallen out of alignment with the church, and that you now need to do something about that. Um, I think what this question really is about cheerfully doing these things is uh, not doing it grudgingly. And so, do we do a lot of things cheerfully, do you think?
I think again that's practice.
Yeah,
This whole life is practice, basically.
it almost feels like you have to be good at it, don't you, before you can really cheerfully do
Well, if
something.
yeah, if somebody think that, like community church is gonna make you perfect, it's like, all right, let's review all the scriptures again. You know, um, no, like I think it's the natural man to not like uncomfortable in pain, and so to do anything that is not what the natural tendency is gonna be bringing forward a grudge, because instantly we're like, oh, it's not what I want to do, right? But what I've learned is, even if it's not something I want to do, but it's something that I know it's the Lord's will, then I shift my focus and I try to like reconstruct the perspective I have, that because it's what He wants, it must be good. And because it must be good, then I should make an effort. And I'm realizing more and more that when you use humor, a sense of humor, um, and just an optimistic, like just joy, pure joy, it does help through the hard, what do you call it? The little hard part, that you have to go through, kind of like the birth pain. Like you have to go through the birth pain anyway in order to get the baby. You can't skip that. Um, but it's like, it's funny that you asked that question, because I literally just experienced it last 2 weeks. Because I was not a kid who was known for being a cheerful kid. In fact, a lot of people who knew me growing up, they would always call me the pessimistic. And from my perspective, I was like, I'm not pessimistic. I'm just being realistic. That was my view. Yeah. Because I was like, well, this is going wrong and that's going wrong and that, it was just like that kind of logic. But the more my desire to learn and my desire to know for myself is, one, is God real? And once I got that knowledge, that sure knowledge, then I wanted to know Him personally, not from somebody else. I wanted to have that personal relationship. So once I got to that level, He would give me aspect of Him so that I get to know Him. And one of the aspects that I was given a couple weeks ago was joy. That's His nature. He has joy. And I didn't realize that until after. So I know we haven't spoken much before, but like I just got this calling in a church, which is a first for me, which was it's music cursor for the primary. I have no musical talent, no musical training, nothing. And so I laughed when I was given that talk, because I mean that invitation to do that calling, because I was like, oh, I forgot that God can hear my thought. Because a week prior being invited to do this calling, I was in Sacramento singing. I love singing, but again, I don't have training, like nothing, right? I never sign up for choirs because I get hit too quickly with the power of songs, and so I start to cry. And then there's no sound coming, so I'm like, forget it. I'm not signing up for any choir. I'll rather let somebody else who can actually sing take the spot. So anyway, I was there on Sunday again with the book and started to sing. But again, at this point, my vision is kind of blurry. And I'm like, here, I'm complaining. I'm like, I can't see anything, but I really want to sing. And then in my head, I'm like, if I can just memorize the words, that would be helpful. Like, who cares if my vision's gone? At least I have the words in my head. A week later, I get called to be the music chorister. Oh, you heard my thought. That would be one way I can memorize words. So anyway, so I accepted the calling, right? That's one way to keep yourself humble. It's like to jump in something you know nothing, and you have
I
to rely on Him.
I really love that you have this calling. It's kind of ironic because my sister also has that same calling, and she too has no musical training. But
Oh my
I
God.
do have some musical training. I'm actually the primary pianist in our ward right now. So I understand like the blurry vision, and when I hear these kids sing and stuff, it's just so beautiful and it makes me so happy. But what the advice that I give to anybody who is taking that calling as the primary chorister is that you don't have to have musical skills because these kids probably don't have any either. They don't know. But what you do have to do is make it fun and you have to make it exciting for them to learn music. And so it really ties into, doing things cheerfully. Because when you make it fun for the kids, they just love it and they gravitate towards that music and
They're the
it
most
really
forgiving
helps them.
audience.
Yeah.
Yeah. They learn such great principles from the music that they learn. And so I love being in primary. I'm really enjoying being back in primary. I always go through periods of time where, I'm the primary pianist. I always get, that's a calling that I, recurringly get.
Your life calling.
Yeah, yeah, they'll really, yeah, it's the yo-yo calling. I just keep getting yo-yoed back into it. But I enjoy it and that's a talent that I have that I enjoy that I have and I feel like I've consecrated that talent to the Lord, that he has helped me to learn how to play the piano and so therefore, when I'm asked to play, I always like to do that if I can.
Yeah. Well, I love that. Well, that's how I learn another aspect of God, the joy, because again, like, yeah, I like to laugh with my kids or my friends, right? But it was such a different, unique experience to be out there and then do all these fun songs with them. And I felt it in my physical body for the first time. Like, I mean, I felt joy before, but this was a different joy. And at the end of it, it was like I heard clearly, that's me. That's me. I'm joy. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Like I was just like taken back. I was like, this is awesome. And then that feeling just kind of kept with me like the next 2 weeks. Like, when things would like kind of go crazy instead of being like, like joining with the craziness. It was like, hey, just approaching it with like that joy. It was just kind of not contaminating, what contagious.
Yeah.
And so I can
Yes.
see how this section right there is like, you know what, we could actually make the world a lot better right now if we actually choose to like let God show us his nature of joy, because I experienced it for 2 weeks. Like, I mean, I had that moment, right? But the effect of it lasted 2 weeks and it was like amazing. And I'm actually, it's almost like it's dwindling. I'm like, all right, I want it back again. Like, give me that again. So I can be like more cheerful with my kids, with everybody. And but there's a real effect of doing things cheerfully. It just push people along. It pushes people forward. And when I say push, it probably is not the right word, but like it basically moves the work forward. It helps people to move further along on their healing journey. Whatever it is that they were dealing with, it moves them further along than where they were at instead of being stuck. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. That's
Right.
why the pioneer children sang as they walked and
Yes.
walked and walked.
Yeah. You kind of have to. Yeah. And I think with the principle of cheerfully, um, it connects for me at least the principle of creation. Um, And with that, I see the other piece of thinking celestial. You know how President Nelson has been really bringing that principle forward a lot. And it's not a new principle, really. If you look at all the scriptures, and not just scriptures, but even your own sacred record from all the different tribes, from
Mhm.
different culture, um, turns out the process of creation is amazing. And it's not just God, like he's actually helping us to remember how to create. And cheerfulness is part of that. Like you have to see what's in front of you and you have to like visualize the what it can be, right? Instead of just like, oh, this is a bad situation. No, like you have to look at it and see the potential for good. And then once you grab onto that thought, then you start formulating in your mind a plan, right? And then you start to speak it. Just like in Genesis, he saw, and then he he saw first, and then he thought about it, and then he spoke it, and it came to be, right? So those pattern of creation, like we all keep forgetting that we can do that on a daily basis in all the spheres that we're in. And so like to think cheerfully is a huge piece of it.
Yep.
That was great. Thank you so much. You have shared some really great thoughts. We're going to ask you one final question, and that is, why are you thankful for the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ?
Ooh, my life would not be the same.
Mm.
I know for sure I would have a very, very different life. You and I would never have met. I would have been somewhere in France doing some kind of art study and probably missed out on all this amazing um, spiritual journey. I can't say that because I've learned that God is in everybody's life. And so I think what the restoration has done for me personally, it has sped up that spiritual journey. I think that's more correct because I've known other friends also outside of the faith, or people who have no faith. I see God in their lives. He hasn't forgotten them. And so I think for me, when I really pause to think about it, it just sped up my spiritual journey. That's what it does. And so I think when we invite others to come in and take a look for themselves, what it is that Jesus has taught us and through Joseph Smith and everybody else, that they can try for themselves and see for themselves that, you know what, they could also have that sped up spiritual journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sister Boyce, for joining us today. This has been a really wonderful discussion, and you've just brought so many good thoughts and ideas into this conversation. You know, we talked a little bit before we started recording, and you had mentioned that, you know, you like to think about how to live, live this, how to apply the scriptures to your life, and you've done a really great job of talking about that with these sections for this week. So thank you for that. We want to invite everybody to join us again next week by watching on the Gathering of Tribes YouTube channel, or by joining us on your favorite audio podcast platform. If you like this podcast, we would love for you to leave us a review. Reviews not only help us they not only uplift us, but they also help others to find our podcast. Um, if you would like to learn more about the mission of Gathering of Tribes, you can do that by going to the website, which is www.gatheringoftribes.org. Thank you for joining us. May your path be peaceful and enlightening this week.